Richard Bowman Myers is the 14th president of Kansas State University and a retired four-star general in the United States Air Force, who served as the 15th chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. As chairman, Myers was the highest-ranking uniformed officer of the United States military forces. Myers became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs on October 1, 2001. In this capacity, he served as the principal military advisor to the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council during the earliest stage of the War on Terror, including planning and execution of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Joining me today in the Capital TV show, General Richard Myers, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Welcome back again, General. How are you?
Thank you, Maria. How are you? I'm fine. Thank you.
I'm fine. I'm going to start asking, I'm going to take a quote from the Washington Post that said, after a Taliban takeover, the world must prevent starvation in Afghanistan. How do you describe the whole story? Maybe if you can say the mess.
Yeah, so I think President Biden has come out lately and talked about it being not well done, and that's an understatement. It was not well done. I'm no longer in government, so I don't know that I have all the details on the whys and wherefores of that. But it was, as a former military person, as a person who cares deeply about the people of Afghanistan. It was heart-wrenching to see hear the stories, see the stories, and we're still involved. I mean, my wife has been very involved in helping some Afghan families to leave and so forth. So that's, it's just heartbreaking in every sense. And then we hear, economic. I think it was just today or yesterday where. They can only use the local currency, and a lot of the money in the banks is in dollars. So there's already economic hardship, and then winter's approaching, and we hear about the potential for starvation, and that we just can't. I mean, the world can't allow this to happen, and somehow we have to find the leadership around the world. The U.S. ought to be a big part of that. We ought to be a big part of that, and how we prevent that. I know when we first went into Afghanistan back in 2001, it was also wintertime, and we dropped a lot of appropriate meals from aircraft, and we got permission from Russia to overfly Russia to drop these meals to places where there was a real shortage of food. I don't know what it's going to take here in the future in a country like Afghanistan, which, as most people know, doesn't have great infrastructure everywhere. But whatever we have to do, that is we don't want this story to end that way, in my opinion.
All right.
And right now, I'm not in a position where I can do anything about it other than to talk about it and to encourage.
In your opinion, how will the Biden administration deal with the Taliban government?
Well, unfortunately, that whole series of events was started in the Trump administration that came out with deadlines and so forth. So I think that wasn't smart, and it kind of helped lead to sort of the debacle that we saw as the Taliban took over and all that we've witnessed here in the last couple of months. I don't know. I know early on in the President Bush administration, there was an attempt to deal with the Taliban government and to leave them in power if they would turn over al-Qaeda. They declined. And that led to our involvement in Afghanistan with troops. I think we have to be very careful how we deal with the Taliban. There's some who think, well, this is going to be a different Taliban than previously. I'm not convinced. I've seen a lot of evidence that would say that's not true. But I'm also one that says you never shut off the opportunity for some diplomacy. You never shut that off. You always keep those lines of communication open, and trying to find a way maybe where you have some mutual interest where you can, with the end result being able to take better care of the population. That's the end result in this case.
Another story about Iran from Responsible Statecraft. Groups call on Biden to ease sanctions on Iran to jumpstart nuke talks. Your approach?
So my thoughts on that is that would be a good thing. I think it was wrong to personally to take the sanctions off earlier. I think if Iran wants to come to the table and start talking about that again, I think that would be good for the world. The non-proliferation of nuclear material and nuclear weapons is always good for the world. So I welcome that thought, and I would hope they're successful.
Mm-hmm. So what about, or what you say about Iran's promoting terrorism?
Well, at least during my tenure as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and as vice chairman, there was clear evidence that Iran was backing terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and others. So that's not helpful. And again, if we can get back to some sort of agreement around the production of nuclear material, fissile material, that would be a start to a dialogue. It's just been really frustrating to me in my since the Shah fell in Iran to have these really, really bad relations with a population that is a great population in terms of their intellectual ability. Everything about the Persian people is really, really good, and to not have them more part of the normal world order is disappointing.
Foreign Policy magazine accused Iran recently of trying to fill in the strategic vacuum left by the departures of power in the Middle East. Is it true, and why?
No, I think that's, there's an old saying that nature abhors a vacuum. And this is one of the things that Dr. Kissinger talked about when he talked about our strategic interest in the Middle East. And one was not leave a vacuum for countries like Iran to fill. And so I think I would agree that it's an opportunity for Iran to exert more influence on Iraq, possibly Afghanistan, and other countries in the region with the U.S., at least out of Afghanistan. I think the U.S. Relationship with the other Gulf states is still positive and will remain positive, but as Iran feels more emboldened by this new found freedom to act, it doesn't bode well for stability in the Persian Gulf area because of their conflicts with Saudi Arabia and some of the other Gulf states.
Mm-hmm. Since you served as the military advisor for the National Security Council during the earliest stage of the war on terror, including planning and execution of the 2003 Iraq war, what is your approach on the Biden administration withdrawal from Iraq?
I think it was the Obama administration that actually got us out of Iraq, and I think so. I think that's a good place to be right now. I don't see. Personally, I don't see any military intervention on the horizon in that regard. And I think we need to be supportive. Iraq's another country that has all the natural resources and the people to be very successful and to help as we are invited to help, but not to be aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the climate change, let's see. USA Today comments that Biden announced the rule to limit methane leaks targeting oil and gas industry at COP26 climate summit. How do you see this interest in climate change?
Well, I'm one that's much in favor of it. I think climate change, like a lot of things in life, climate change will hurt some of the poor countries and the poorer people more than others. And so I think we need to deal with it. I think it's a serious issue. We need to deal with it. And I think those that are heavily invested in fossil fuels need to find other ways to develop new forms of energy, new types of energy, so we can still have the energy we need without harming our climate anymore. And I think there are technologies out there that could help. So that could have a huge impact on the Middle East. But over time and with the right investments, they can probably mitigate a lot of the economic impact.
General, you served as the 50th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What is your thoughts on the recent congressional testimonies of the top military leaders in USA?
Well, my thoughts are that in contrast to when I went in front of Congress, which I did many times, the House and our Senate, that it seems like the position of the chairman is being politicized more and more. So we have a very divisive political environment in the United States right now, in our two-party system, a very divisive period we're going through. And I think some of that falls down then on people that are testifying, like General Milley, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who, by our tradition in the United States, we are not political, we are apolitical. But the political forces that are trying to make some kind of political point sometimes uses the chairman as the football in these hearings to kick around and make different points. But I think so far he's held steadfast, been apolitical, and I know him, and I know he's trying to do the best he and his people, his staff can, the Joint Chiefs.
Mm-hmm. 1 year has passed since the signing of the Abraham Accords. Can you talk about the Biden administration success in listing more countries or more nations to join?
Well, I just know what I read right now, so I think it's a good start. There's some really important countries that have not signed up yet that need to, if we're going to be successful as a human race on this planet. Mm. I think that's yet to come, and some of those countries, the U.S. doesn't have particularly good, strong, trusting relationships at this point. Mm-hmm. But that has to come. At least a couple of them. That has to come if we're going to be successful as a human race.
Mm-hmm. General Meyer, we heard the news and we saw an interview with a former official appeared on American media, and he calls Mohammed bin Salman as a psychopath. It seems that there is another blackmailing for Saudi Arabia by the media and the deep state, if we can say, in USA. So how do you see this after Khashoggi, of course?
Well, I think people need to understand we are a democracy. We have a free press, open and free. They can say anything they want to say. And sometimes they say things that are probably not appropriate or maybe not true. I don't know the veracity, the truth of that. I doubt it. I mean, so that's what you get when you have a free country and a free press. And it's messy, but it's still better to be able to express your opinions than to have your opinions held down. And so while I might not agree with that statement and what was said, I do agree that he has the right to say that. And if people want to listen, they can listen. They can make up their own mind. So but it's not helpful. It's not helpful to those in the U.S. government that are trying to work with friends and allies all around the world and build these trusting relationships. It's not helpful when somebody says something like that.
On another hand, a story from the Hill said that Biden blamed Saudi Arabia for inflation instead of reckless spending as approval on economy plummets. How do you see the relationship with Saudi Arabia these days?
I haven't heard that. I thought our relationship with Saudi Arabia was pretty good these days from the U.S. viewpoint. Mm-hmm. I have not heard those comments, but so I'd have to read him and see what he said and think about that. But mm-hmm. It's as a government, we have a lot of our own issues that we need to attend to, and blaming others. Now, sometimes other people do contribute to problems, but I think you have to be very, very cautious how you do that.
Mm-hmm. General Miles, you worked on war on terrorism. How do you evaluate the role of UAE in combating terrorism, the cooperation with USA?
The cooperation with the UAE, when I was the chairman, was very good. And I think it still is. They allowed us to have a big air base there and provided us a lot of support. We had good relationships with government officials. So, and that was essential. I mean, the United States is a long way from the Middle East. That was essential to some of the things we were doing to help countries there in the region. So I found them to be extremely, extremely helpful, forward-looking in terms of where they were headed economically in the future. And it was always a pleasure to visit.
Lloyd Austin, Defense Secretary, said there is a new war, like cyber war, coming from Russia or from China. What is the difference between your time and the traditional war and the new war he's talking about?
Well, in my time, we still had the threat from cyber and cyber attacks, so it was certainly a presence threat. In fact, when I left office, a lot of people would say it was the number one threat to the United States. I never got to that point in my own evaluation, but so I think it's something that impacts the whole world, because cyber attacks can be global, and there are some countries that we know put a lot of effort into their cyber attack capability, and Russia is one of those. China is one of those. Those are pretty well known. There are others as well, and I think this is the kind of issue that, in essence, we need to do kind of as collectively, in a collective manner. A lot of us working against this particular threat, because we're all vulnerable. We have to figure out ways to mitigate that, to build systems that aren't vulnerable, and so forth. But it's yes, it's worse. I mean, they're better at this than they were when I was chairman. Things like ransomware we hadn't encountered in large quantities at that time. Now that's pretty common. Lots of things that can shut us down. So yeah, it's a real danger to all of us on the planet.
I want to choose a question on the local news about the race, governor race. We had the Virginia race, and the count of more than 95% of the vote shows Youngkin by 2.7 points over Democrat Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of this eastern U.S. state. What is the sign of the Republican coming back to power? Is there any change we're going to see in the maybe coming election?
Well, I think the coming election, what we call the midterms here in next year, generally those always favor the party that's out of power. So in this case, it'd be the Republicans. So you would expect that anyway. This was a little unexpected, because I think the last time that Virginia selected a Republican governor was, 11, 12 years ago. So it's a bit of a surprise. One of the things that's interesting is, as I understand it, is that Governor-elect Youngkin did not rely on President Trump to come to the state and campaign for. In fact, he wanted to walk a fine line between being, sort of pro President Trump and his own man. That seemed to work for him there, and he got a lot of votes. So I don't know what it says to the larger races. It was a unusual result for Virginia, at least in the last decade plus. But we'll see how he governs too. I think everybody's waiting to see how he governs a big state, the state of Virginia, which will be my home state here shortly.
Thank you, General Chardmais, for being with us. Thank you for your time, and I'm very glad to see you again in my show.
Maria, nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.